Today I'm working by myself off a tripod. My lovely wife is traveling, so I'll do my best to capture angles for you guys. I'm going to be doing some, I did a blow dry demo on this long Nadine mannequin about a week ago, and realized she really needs a haircut. So I thought it would be nice to, I want to keep her long, you know, something that we typically do, you know, kind of a lot of in the salon world, but get this a lot better looking on the ends and then also lighten it up by working through the middles. I've chosen to work dry, kind of like after the blow dry kind of thing here, which might not be a bad choice for someone like this with very long hair who, you know, I have nothing against cutting hair wet or damp. I do it all the time. But I think sometimes this is also great for the client to be able to exactly see what you're doing. It's kind of instant gratification. All right, so first starting off very, very simply here, working on the line, the ends of the hair, holding it in the comb, using the scissor on diagonals out from the center, and really just trying to get in a square but soft line. You can see I put the scissor behind and I use the comb and scissor together to brace the hair so that I can control it. And using point cutting, working with my HB Pro Dry, so all my lines will be soft and, you know, not especially kind of blunt in any way. I'm going to take some of this hair up over the fingers now and check into it a little bit more deeply. Still on a diagonal. I don't really want to thin this too much. I want to just kind of get a chunky quality. Bend that over the fingers. Come in, my ends I didn't change, I already cut them. So coming through. I'll try to stop and check for any comments or questions every once in a while. Of course, those of you that watch frequently, thank you for always tuning in and supporting. Kelly's traveling today, so I'm on a tripod. So you won't get all those amazing angles that Kelly always shows, but the show must go on. Okay, so again, the concept here today is this hair needs two things. It really needs the ends kind of checked, literally, to get rid of some of the dead stuff that's on the ends. And then it's gonna need movement. So I'm gonna do work on the ends first, using point cutting, and then I'm gonna use back cutting to add more to the hair without making it shorter. And I'll show you what I mean here. So I'm gonna lift this up and out, elevating. So all the length is dropping out, we're maintaining the length and we're getting layering. This is gonna be kind of like double layer. So there'll be a panel here and one here. And this is the stuff I wanna get rid of. These old ends that I don't think were ever cut. I think when I pulled this beautiful Nadine mannequin out, she had never been cut. She's got a full head of highlights as well, done part of our intensive color series with Catherine Burkert. At hblive.me. So if you want to, you know, see how this beautiful classic full head of highlights is done, head over to hblive.me and, you know, think about getting a subscription. It's only right now $95 for all access for the year, over 100 hours of technical, highly produced education. So if you like this, if you like just, you know, going live with a camera and a tripod, you're gonna love that. Much more detail, angles, perfect sound, all the good stuff. Okay, so elevating, not a lot of over direction. I'm kind of pulling it straight on base, so to speak, but elevating, bringing that hair up and looking to make sure that I'm getting that layered effect on the ends of the hair and also getting rid of some of those dead ends from, you know, obviously it's a mannequin, but let's just say it's hair that's just grown a long time without a cut, and then also had some high lift color. But this is only part one. You know, we're doing a bit of the layering here, and what I really want to show you is that, you know, sometimes with long hair, if we just focus on the ends, which is kind of, you know, a traditional way of doing hair cutting, but I think we've moved into something a little bit more dimensional than that, where we're working not only on the ends, but then working inside the hair as well. Going down, then lock the tripod. It's beautiful Nadine mannequin here, great hair to work with. In my universal tripod, which is, you know, without a doubt the strongest, most durable that I've ever used. Coming up, kind of bending over the fingers, using the HB Pro Dry on a slight diagonal. You know, with what I'm doing here, there is a technical guideline. It's, you know, definitely has a lot of relationships to any type of traditional hair cutting. Just working with point cutting and doing it on a diagonal here so I get a nice kind of serrated line. But that's not all that I want to do. I want to get that in there. Then, now again, that really has just affected this area from here to here. And with this dense hair and kind of modern styling techniques, very often we need more than that, but we don't necessarily want to technically layer the hair more than that all the time. So that's where what I'm about to do comes in here. I'm going to take that again. Now I'm not going to affect the ends of the hair. I'm going to actually kind of like right where I've technically layered here to here, I'm not going to do anything. But I'm going to come in here, and obviously it's up to you where you think you want to go, but I'm going to come about halfway between my fingers and the root, and I'm going to start using a gentle back cutting technique to put surface texture, movement, and life into this hair. So this is kind of surface layering, micro layering, right behind here, without changing. It's changing the density of the ends a little bit, but it's not doing anything to the length of the ends. Again, being pretty gentle here, especially in this underneath panel. I want to respect that length of the hair, keep a good density, but you know, kind of working in two separate ways. First working on the ends of the hair, then working between the ends and the head, where really literally not much is happening. You know, I could technically layer it a lot more, but that, you know, kind of changes long hair. You know, it could turn into something really not desirable. All right, so you can see the difference there. This had the ends cut, this had the ends and the inside cut. I'll take a second here. As I said, I'm working alone today. As you guys know, most of the time I'm working with Kelly operating the camera. So hopefully you're able to see. I'll try to move around as much as I can. I think what we've got here is a lot of comments in the way, so maybe we'll lower the tripod. Normally Kelly's moving it around. Okay, so again, now working into the second side. Bring this hair out parallel with the floor. Sections about 1 inch thick. I'm working with my Primp dry cutting comb. Great little comb for this kind of cutting. It's got like deeper valleys between the teeth so that it can grab the hair even when it's dry. I mean, one of the benefits of working with wet hair is you have more control. So, you know, by changing the tool that you're working with, you can try to get that same control. Okay, section. Not a lot of over direction here at all because all the length is dropping out and the hair is very, very thick and dense. And I don't want to keep too much thickness behind the ears. Working through. Since I'm using the HB Pro Dry, it doesn't cut a very sharp line. The way the blades are sharpened, they push the hair before they cut. So it doesn't pull the hair in and cut it really clean. It pushes it out and does it in a very loose way. So again, getting that looseness happening in here. Now I was pretty light with that, and I will be through the whole thing. I want to be kind of maybe really truly kind of commercial here, which I tend to be anyway, because that's what we do. We don't, you know, we cut hair for people in our salons who, you know, they tend to be perhaps guarded, so afraid that maybe things are going to get a little too wild, and sometimes they do. So learning how to use cool techniques but in a commercial way, to me, is very, very important. Okay, next panel will be from the top of the occipital bone to the top of the ears. And it's going to be kind of basically exactly the same. There'll be no technical connection between the layers. I'm going to come through and layer that first. You can see it's just kind of like laying on top of this previous hair. So it's going to be very important to layer it through first. And again, as we're saying, the kind of concept here is that there's two things happening. We're working on the ends of the hair, and then we are also working inside the hair. So as I lift this up, actually, there's my shortest layer from the underneath panel. It drops away completely. I'm coming up here, angling my fingers a little bit. Once you've got it locked in, kind of locked and loaded. You can do what they call a triple lock, where you get your fingers behind here and then you can move it. And you know, this is the stuff that really needed to come off. There's no, you know, no reason to hang on to those spindly ends. Come in, make my angle. The angle's going just slightly shorter towards the inside. That will help this, when it falls over, to disappear into the underneath hair. Yeah, if it's inverted a little bit, or what's sometimes known as concave, it's much easier when it falls over the underneath hair to not make any kind of a shelf or a ledge. So you see I try to dip my knuckles in a little bit. Once that hair is locked, I feel comfortable maneuvering it, especially because, you know, the haircut's quite loose. I'm gonna go in a little bit deeper. And just get a little bit more separation in there. Definitely salon friendly in a modern way. You know, I had done a little bit of a blow dry demo on Nadine here last week using some of my favorite new brushes from our friends at Denman. And as I was working, I thought, well, boy, she really needs a trim. I mean, if she was in the salon, I probably would have tried to have done that. If she came in just for a blow dry, I would have said, hey, we need to, you know. And if they, you know, if people are trusting you and they feel that you've got their best interests at heart, you know, they'll typically tend to go with it. And again, if you're working dry like this, it's very easy for that client to see exactly what you're doing and perhaps not get nervous or intimidated, which can happen very often with longer hair. So again, just working with the tripod today. For those of you that are familiar and join in often, you know, normally my wife Kelly is working the camera, so I'm just going to stop for a minute, have a look, say hello to everyone out there. I'm in beautiful Southern California here, working from the home studio, something that we started doing. You know, we've been doing these lives for, I don't know, since as long as they've been available through Hairbrained and through Facebook. So I guess that's going on, it's got to be well over 5 years now. Probably more than that. I think they started in like 2015 or something. But, you know, during the pandemic, which unfortunately is still during the pandemic, we started being able to work from home. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, it's actually quite nice to work here just in front of my garden and just share at any time, you know, working with beautiful mannequins from Pivot Point. And here we're working on, you know, long hair cutting. Although obviously a lot of what I'm using here can be interpreted into many lengths, it definitely is very, very relevant to long hair for many reasons. You know, it's very visual. It can be done after the hair is styled to just kind of really bring out what you've been creating. It can be very easy to see the lengths that you're taking off, the separation, the texture that you're making, all very important stuff. I have no problem with I cut wet and dry, curly and straight. You know, for me, it's my 30th year as a hairdresser, and I believe that, you know, you gotta do it all. Do we continue to put new content on HB Live? Absolutely, absolutely. We've got over 100 hours, and we were just in the studio last week filming new content. So there are, you know, typically up to 3 new full courses every month. And those full courses are generally a minimum of 90 minutes long. And they cover a wide variety of topics with a wide variety of artists. Go check it out for yourself, guys. It's completely free for 3 days. Head to hblive.me or just kind of Google Hairbrain Live Academy, and you'll find we've got cutting, color, business. We've even got great perms. We've got a little bit of everything there to keep you guys interested and educated and inspired. All right, so now coming back through, again, breaking down into those 1-inch sections, coming through about halfway, using the back cutting technique on the surface here. Now these are clean cuts. I'm opening and closing without closing all the way, so it's not scraping the hair in any way. For those of you that are maybe, you know, worried about razor cutting, this is a great alternative if you know, to get a kind of a razored effect without razoring the hair. I mean, I love razor cutting. If any of you know me, it's one of my favorite things to do. But you know, I know it's not for everyone. And again, you can see that weight that's coming out there. So first, taking care of the ends. Super important to do that. And you know, this isn't always a great way to take care of the ends. I mean, sometimes you can do this kind of cutting and then come back and just detail your ends. But with this Nadine here, I felt like her ends really needed my attention. And then this, what's happening here is kind of just giving a little bit extra to the haircut. So sometimes you have to decide what's more important. I mean, if you're just gonna barely dust the ends, then you go ahead and maybe do this first and then do the ends second. Through. You decide, you know, how far you want to go in, you know, visually where you want these layers to start. I mean, they should disappear fairly well into the hair. I will point out one of the important things here, if you want them to be more seamless, is to keep the blade kind of parallel to the floor. Don't drop the tip down a lot, or you'll get more visible kind of cut marks in the hair. Could be cool for something else. But for something like this, where I want it to just be kind of more seamless and a little bit more invisible, I probably want to stay away from that. I'm going to add a little bit of healing oil from our friends at Lanza. It's a keratin healing oil. Just a tiny little bit of that, just to kind of get some oil into the ends and see how this hair is responding. Twist it in, get my fingers in there. Let's see how we're doing here. Okay, the hair's a lot lighter. And healthier. So it's two things. The ends now aren't so kind of spindly or scraggly, and we've got a little bit more excitement happening there. So we're going to continue now, and just breaking the head up in kind of a logical way. The next panel here will be right to above the round of the head and kind of diagonal forward just a little tiny bit. Using seamless clips. These are typically used, I call them like wave setting clips. People use them very often with hairdressing. But with dry cutting, you know, if you've got enough of them, you can kind of stick them in there and get a really good effect. All right, so continuing through. Again, I treat each panel pretty individually. You know, I think if you've got a really kind of good grasp on what's happening and you work clean in your panels, you can determine what you want to see in each panel. So here again, I'm going to come in and first layer these ends. You can see how just spindly and kind of raw they are. So coming in, using point cutting to get an irregular line, but a much cleaner, healthier effect on the ends of the hair. Pretty sure Nadine's never had a haircut, plus she's had, as you can see, a beautiful classic full head highlight from Catherine Burke. We pretty much just finished up an intensive color series with Catherine. I believe there are 8 color techniques plus a bunch of mini lessons. Many of those techniques are already available on hblive.me, but last week we finished the last mini lessons, and then the whole program will be available. And just like everything, you can buy things kind of a la carte if you're just interested in one program, one course, or you can really go, you know, and do what I think makes the most sense for $95, get a whole year subscription, all access, where you can see everything, well over 100 hours of videos. Okay, continuing. Now this is also going to create a bit of a face frame just because it's next to the face. So, you know, thinking about what's happening here is thinking about what's going to happen around the face. Lifting it out and working through and seeing how that's relating to the hair in the back. It's relating well, but you know, if you can see, I know sometimes you don't get the best camera work here, especially when it's on a tripod. If Kelly was here, you'd see a bit more. Missing Kelly right now. Thanks for letting me know. It looks like a hot mess. Sounds like you're a really cool person. Congratulations on your positivity and your wonderful attitude. I love that. What do you guys think about people like that? You know, I've been doing this for many years, and usually I just have a laugh because it's just kind of funny, isn't it? All right, come through. Work. Now decide how much you want to take off. Use the back cutting technique On the front here, you know, I was a little bit more cautious just to see what's going to happen there. Getting a little bit of movement in there and then continuing back through and continue. Again, bring it together and without closing all the way, clean cuts right on the surface. We'll start to make movement and pliability. Straight out. You know, clean sections, it's easy sometimes, especially as you kind of get into the pattern, you know, where you might not work as clean, but then you just kind of something, a little buzzer should go off in your brain to, hey, stop, make sure your sections are organized, and work your way through. And there we go. And again, you can see, now there's always, like, you know, because when you work like this, you create a lot of loose corners in the hair. So you do have to be somewhat careful and remember that there's going to need to be kind of a refining stage where I go through all the ends of the hair. So at this point, I'm starting to see like where those corners are, and they're kind of, you know, towards the ends of the hair. And that's, you know, I tend to save that towards the very end. Because if you do them too early, you kind of start to lose your balance. Because when you break up those corners, it definitely changes things. So when you're looking for balance, it can make it a little bit more difficult. Same on the opposite side here. Let's just, at this point, I'll stop. Get this wonderful new paddle brush from Denman. It looks just like what most people would think of the typical Denman, but it's kind of a giant version. Make sure we're brushing through the hair really well, because working dry can be easy to get kind of tangly. And again, right above the round of the head. And bring that over there. And again, these clips, as you'll notice, they can just gently hold the hair without putting anything really heavy in there. Okay, awesome. So coming back through here, again, clean section at the back of the ear. And if I have some clips, I can toss this in here and get this out of the way. I'm gonna drop her down a little. And it's the same idea. About a 1-inch thick section. They're not overly thick. And like, here's the thing, by the time I get to the ends, there's not a lot of hair. So if I was to take little 1/4-inch sections, makes a lot of sense when you're working closer to the head with something like a graduated bob or, you know, but when you're working very long like this, I feel comfortable taking my sections a little bit thicker, especially knowing this hair. If it was completely as dense at the ends, I might take them a little bit thinner. But by the time I get down here, there's not that much hair. But it's important that, that I take care of that hair. And that's why we're doing this kind of 2-phase process. Cutting the ends first to get rid of this stuff here. Using point cutting on a diagonal. And working in. Now remember, this really kind of, you know, it folds around the face, so it's gonna, you know, form a bit of a face frame, to be completely honest, right? This angle here is gonna fold down here, and it's gonna create what, you know, what hits the body and the softness of it. So angling inward a little bit, and cutting on a diagonal to get rid of that excess length. Last section. Really make sure we've got a good control on there. You know, almost keeping the existing length here. I probably will take a look at it, how it relates to the back in a minute, but I'm working with it. I know this mannequin kind of naturally has like a face frame angle to it. So I think that by using the existing length after trimming up some of the back, it should be pretty close to where it needs to be. Get this clip out of the hair here. There we go. Let's see how that's relating. I'm going to need to do a little bit of a connection in the corner here, But let's continue with what we've been working on. So coming through. So we've got the ends much healthier, you know, kind of in a traditional way, but you know, and that might be enough of a haircut for some people, but I want to put a little bit more movement and life on the inside using the back cutting technique here. So you can see, it takes out a little bit of bulk, definitely. It's going to put a little bit more kind of surface action on the hair for styling and, you know, getting more kicks and flips. It's also going to bring out more of the natural wave. So if I allow this hair to dry naturally or use a diffuser or anything like that, it's going to be more responsive. You know, only you can decide, you know, how deep you want to go, where you want to go. Obviously, if you're first learning and playing around, be careful. Maybe just stick to the ends of the hair and see what happens. And then, you know, start to push it perhaps a little bit further over time. You know, pressure is important, you know, the symmetry of how much weight you're taking out from side to side. And that can be a little bit tricky. And now I can see what's coming over from the back and just lightly blending the two together. Okay, now we're up into the top here. We're going to keep it simple, and I'll just work off the natural parting that's here. Again, I can definitely pull out my power paddle here from the friends at Denman Brush. Started working with Denman this year, so happy. Something that I've used for over 30 years, different Denman brushes and tools, and now to be working with them, it's awesome. As well as Pivot Point, you know, for us, mannequins are a big part of education, big part of learning, big part of practicing. If you've never done something like this and you want to try it, you know, getting a mannequin, and this one is fantastic, the Nadine. You know, depending on how I planned it out, I could probably get 8 to 10 haircuts, 8 to 10 lessons out of this mannequin, all the way down to, you know, a scissor over comb or something like that. Okay, again, just working very, very simply. I'm going to work now another panel of layering just to clean up the ends here. So we'll come through. I know that this was basically everything above the round of the head, so I can see that all falling out. And I can start to lift this up. And again, once I've got it locked, especially if I do kind of the triple lock here where I get my fingers in, I can come through and get rid of some of this. So this is a 2 process. First we get rid of the ends, then we come back and work on the inside. Yeah, normally, you know, you guys that watch often would see that I'm just working from a tripod today, meaning the camera. So I don't have my wife, who usually makes this a much better experience for everyone to get the best camera shots and ask your questions. But, you know, as they say, the show must go on. She was traveling today. I didn't want to cancel, so I'm here using a tripod. I'll try to take a look. Can you work on some shoulder length heavy hair? Absolutely. You know, we're doing these all the time. So with this Nadine, as we take her shorter, we'll do some other ones. Looks like a lot of other people are just saying hello. We had one mean person earlier, but there's always one in the crowd. Welcome to Facebook Live. But a lot of love. Thank you for your video, so helpful. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Okay, great idea to tie the top, middle, smart. Thank you. Okay, coming through and just working on this. It's almost like a mohawk section. You can actually see it. I don't know how well you can see it there, but you can see where the underneath ends here. And we come through here and getting these dead ends off. Come through. It's probably be the last section. I won't, you know, there's been really no over direction in the haircut. Everything's been on base, and then this will even be slightly forward because it'll just make it fall softer around the face. You know, I can come back later if I feel like I want more of a face frame or more detail. You know, but this is just kind of creating that natural frame. Okay, coming to the opposite side. For this, to get in the right finger position, I would stand in the front. Because when I cut like this, I like to, whenever possible, to keep my fingertips towards the shortest point. It's not something you have to do, but for me, I find it much easier to control kind of inverted concave angle by keeping my fingertips at the shortest point. But you know, everyone's physicality is a little different, so you know, you kind of have to know thyself, so to speak. You know, for many years I taught certain body positions, and you know, they just not for everyone, you know. But what is for everyone is practice to figure out what you get the most consistent results from. So try it this way, try it another way, get yourself some great mannequins, and be the best you can be. You know, it's important to be in control and be precise, but to also, now here I'm just checking, and this is what I mean, like it's really hard to cut these angles for me this way. I can just check it, but I like my fingertips at the shortest point. That's why I've turned the back of the head to you guys, and I'm bringing her up. I'll turn it this way so you can see her face is here at the front. And bring this up and a little bit forward, and again, getting rid of some of these ends. Then we'll come in and use the back cutting to kind of just add that little bit more surface texture. And again, a simple but modern to me approach to something salon friendly. You know, a simple blowout. In this case, the blowout was all done using a Denman paddle brush. If you're interested in seeing how that was done, it was done last week right here on HB Live on Facebook. And you know, for me, it's a great way. It's called leafing, where you can lock the hair through, wrap drying. It's a great way to get a really simple blow dry that looks really pretty and elegant. But then I realized, hey, you know what? She needs a bit of a trim, so here we are for another lesson. Okay, now just these last bits on the top. I'm gonna start from the front and work back, just so as I said, I wanna be able to really control the softness around the face. I want to be a little bit more at first gentle. I'm just going to start here on this last kind of 3/4 of the hair. I'm just kind of softening that a little bit. I'd rather go into it a few times to get where I want to be with it. Being careful the tip of the scissor doesn't go too far downwards. You want it kind of with the grain of the hair. Nice, next section. Again, everything underneath can drop away. Gonna work in a little bit deeper now, about halfway. Make sure that scissor is parallel with the hair shaft, parallel with the floor. And you can always drop and see how much lightness you're getting. You're looking for like an airy effect. And you know, in this case, because the hair was highlighted, a classic highlight using 2 colors, there's a high lift and a tint in here, I think this really brings it out. Kind of starts to let it all peek through. Working right back into the crown. I should start to, as I do this. Now, you might think, you know, that this is purely visual hair cutting, and a lot of it is. But when you start to pick up hair that's already been cut this way, you should be able to see it. So as I get back in here, I know this has already been cut this way, and I can see it. And I go, okay, I know I need to stop here. So first thing that's awesome is, you know, it's much easier to get through this hair and manage it with my fingers. It was definitely a little bit more difficult before the ends were. Why wouldn't you cut the entire thing and then go in after and back cut? You could, you totally could. There's no, you know, it's about your flow. For me, I did this panel by panel, technical, then back cut, technical, then back cut. But you could definitely do that. You know, I guess the one benefit for me is I'm already in the panel. And I'm already like in the mindset of the sections. But there's no right or wrong. You could do all the back cutting first and then do the ends. I think everything, it's not right or wrong, but everything gives a slight difference. And only you can notice that yourself if you kind of practice it and try it out. For me, this felt like a really kind of organized way of doing it, where I could, you know, work in the panel, keep the panel clean, keep the sections clean, you know, really kind of judge each panel as I worked into it. But that's a good question. Thank you very much. You know, I've been cutting hair for 30 years, but I actually started, I don't even count the first few years. When I was 16 or 17, I found a Trevor Sorby video. And I'll never forget, you know, this was the late 80s, and Trevor Sorby was doing some pretty wacky stuff with the hair, even by today's standards, you know, still very, very advanced stuff. And he just had this line where, you know, you're never going to know until you try it. He's like, even if people have told you it's wrong, you have to try, you know? So, you know, either finding that model that's cool and open to trying things, or nowadays, you know, back then the mannequin quality wasn't the same. I mean, honestly, you're not going to get a better model than Nadine here to practice something on, to see how you like it and how it works for you. All right, I guess the last thing, I've been talking about these corners. So basically, you know, when you lift up and you cut, even the ends first, you make a corner. And then by slicing through or back cutting through, you make the corner even stronger. And, you know, it might not be so bad right now. You might be like, okay, I'm not really seeing anything that's disruptive. But I can tell you one thing, corners and haircuts, over time, the hair kind of grows together, and corners make things not last as well. I mean, even like the perfect square flat top, you know, which is all about leaving a corner, right? In a week, it needs maintenance. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just the nature of the haircut. Corners, like you see right here, tend to, you know, the hair grows together, it clumps together, it doesn't behave as well. So here I'm just using a little bit of a slicing technique to take the point off, and a little bit of deeper point cutting to just soften that corner. I don't even need to, again, because it's such a small amount of hair at the ends, I'm taking, you know, one large section down the middle and one behind each ear. Enough that I can really identify that corner. If you can't identify the corner, it might be too little hair in your hand. Little tangle here from before when I was kind of screwing around with that clip. All right, we got it out now. And again, you can see the corner. So first, just kind of breaking it up, and coming in a little bit more. You know, you don't want to just cut it right off. You want to, like, literally the term we used to use was bevel the corner, round the corner. And when you do this in person, I know it can be a little hard to see, especially with the comments. Let's see if I can get it better. Oh. You can see it like takes this like kind of floppiness off. It's that, you know, sometimes that last few percentage points of anything, the last 5% of what you do can be equal to so much more. And I find this is one of those times. So, I mean, anytime you're cutting angles in the hair, you might leave a bit of a corner. So just think about it. Okay, I'm cutting an angle. Am I leaving a corner somewhere? And can I soften that corner? And I may have worked very softly, but even when you work very softly, you're still going to leave a corner. It's just the nature. You'll see it again here. So when I lift this out, right here, you've got this little point. And just beveling those points, to me, I talk a lot about the difference between good and great and everything. We can get away with good, we absolutely can, but great takes everything to the next level. And for me, it's the little things like that. Hair is a lot less dense up here, so being sure to take less off, just gentle, not kind of pounding into it. Through. Again, there she is. Okay, a little bit more of the healing oil from Lanza here. First time working with this product. We've been working with Lanza for many years, but I didn't really have any of their styling products in my kit. So last time I was up in Santa Monica in their offices, they kind of hooked me up. So I've been really enjoying this hair. Actually was prepared before I originally blow dried with the Noni leave-in conditioner, which I loved. And now we're doing a little bit of finishing with this healing oil. I found right away that I like to get a little bit of heat on that product, which is true with a lot of oils. Kind of pushes it into the hair. We'll let that sit for a minute, and we'll look for some corners on the sides here. So again, first we're in the temple, using the no crease clips. All the tools, the comb, the scissor, the clips, all available at Hairbrain Pro, which is our online pro store. You know, the tools do make a difference. Tools alone aren't going to make your work great, but it might be the difference between good to great. You know, the right tool for the job, to make the job just go smoother, to make you have more control, get a better effect. And you know, for me, I've always been kind of a tool junkie because it keeps me interested. You know, I've been doing this for so long that when I get a new shear in my hand, a new comb, a new clip, it's just to get that different feeling in my hands sometimes is enough to make me, you know, live and fight another day, so to speak, instead of being like, I can't, you know, I've done this too many times, or I'm just bored of it. Less of a corner here at the top, just because of the nature of the section, but we'll just make sure, and also the density. Still that little, so even if it's just that 1, 2, 3, right there. Corners typically, unless you're doing, you know, something really graphic, are not your friend. It doesn't mean, you know, corners are bad. It's they're a result of angles, and very often they need to be beveled. You can either do it technically, but I think most of the time now we bevel corners using a little bit more free-form cutting. Okay, same on this side, and then I think I'll be done. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't have Kelly working with me today, so I'm sorry if I didn't get as many shout outs or to as many of your questions. I'll section this off and have a quick look. See if we have any friends or questions. Always my finish work, so I guess Anna agrees. That's good to hear. What about cutting thick, coarse, curly hair dry? Well, you know, you have to figure out what works for you. A lot of people really believe that curly hair should always be cut dry. I don't believe anything should be an always. Always is kind of not my style. But, you know, thick, coarse, curly hair can be cut wet, it can be cut dry, it can even be cut with a razor. It's about who's cutting it and, you know, what they think and what they understand. So unfortunately, there's no like simple answer, yes, do this, or no, do that. Practice is the answer to everything. You know, it's interesting, my good friend, who many of you guys know, if you're, you know, kind of someone who's really into education, DJ Muldoon, he has something that he calls knowledge destroys fear, which I love. And I was thinking about it one day, and the opposite of that is dogma creates fear. So dogma is when people say, this is right, this is wrong, you should always do it this way, never do it that way. It's like giving you rules that you're supposed to follow, you know, and what I believe is that creates fear, especially, you know, sometimes dogma is important, I'm not going to say it's not, but in an art form, you know, where it's not about life or death or, you know, about anything of that nature, you know, it's a haircut. And dogma is just never going to be a good thing. You must always, and you should never, you know, I try to stay away from that. It's human nature to sometimes, you know, kind of delve into that. But sometimes we have to pull ourselves back and go, hey, you know, it's a haircut. Try it, see what happens, get a mannequin, do it a couple times on a mannequin. You know what? There's plenty of things I've been introduced to or I've seen that I'm like, I want to try that. And then I play around with it, and it doesn't work for me. you know, but I don't automatically go, oh no, someone told me a long time ago to never do that, so I'm never gonna do that. That I can't abide.